Hey guys, it's Michael and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of Behind the Song, where each time we meet, we look at the backstory of a song that I feel is worth telling. Now, if you saw the last episode, you might recall me saying this. A song that probably deserves an episode of its own, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Well, today we're looking at another Saxon song, this one being 747, Strangers in the Night. I briefly mentioned this song in the Princess of the Night episode here, but it was their sophomore album, 1980's Wheels of Steel, that really got things going. The album shot to number 5 on the UK album charts, propelled by the second single, 747, Strangers in the Night. Because I briefly mentioned that song in the previous episode, it's time we take a deeper look into it now. I also shared a deeper dive into Saxon's history as a band in that episode, but the part that's relevant to this episode is that 747, Strangers in the Night was released as the second single off Saxon's second album, Wheels of Steel. The song opens with a guitar solo played by guitarist Paul Quinn. This is an interesting song structure, as most metal songs usually begin with a strong riff backed by a steady rhythm. Even today, not many metal songs start off with a singing solo, which makes Strangers in the Night all the more unique. Perhaps more bands should structure their songs like this today? Hey, just a suggestion. Anyway, after Quinn's solo, we get a quick run of the main riff before vocalist Biff Byford begins the first verse, delivering a strong sense of urgency right from this first line. So now that you've heard the first verse, what do you think the song is about? The opening line mentioning a 747 should be a clue. And as you may remember in the Princess of the Night episode, that song was inspired by a real-life train that Byford was enamored with. Strangers in the Night follows the same idea of discussing a real-life event, but rather than a train this time, the song tells the story of a Boeing 747 caught in the Great Northeast Blackout of November 9, 1965. Caused by a misset relay at the Sir Adam Beckle Hydroelectric Generating Station in Niagara Falls, Ontario, the Great Blackout was a period of 13 hours that saw 30 million people in Ontario and 10 U.S. states without electricity. Several stories emerged from the blackout, one of them being the story of a Scandinavian Airlines flight that had to divert to New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, with the pilot's anxiety rising as the plane's fuel ran out. So the first verse sets the scene well for the listener. The 747 in question is on approach to JFK, which has no power to the runway lights or control tower, and the crew needs to land something fierce before they run out of fuel to keep them in the air. The chorus comes after the verse, where Byford seems to switch from the perspective of the air traffic controller to an airline passenger, possibly on a separate flight, also caught in a holding pattern. Note how guitarists Paul Quinn and Graham Oliver's arpeggiated minor chords also add to the uncertainty of the song, too. After the chorus builds on the tension, the second verse echoes the desperation of the flight crew in greater details.
This is Scandinavian 101. Flight from Hawaii coming out of the sun. Kennedy, you should be in sight. We can't see a thing here in the night. Navigator says we're on the flight path. There's no radio, no sign of life. This is Scandinavian 101. For God's sake, get the ground lights on.
Now in character as presumably the captain of the flight identified as Scandinavian 101, Byford reveals they're inbound from Hawaii, which we'll get back to along with other details of the song, by the way. For now, though, Flight 101 has been flying a long-haul flight, presumably with a full load of passengers and crew, anxious to get on the ground, a sensation compounded by the low fuel. And the blackout, meanwhile, is compounding the plane's ability to land. While the flight's navigator says they're on the flight path into JFK, the pilots can't confirm it because of the lack of radio communication and lights. Byford closing the second verse with, "For God's sakes, get the ground lights on," only amplifies the anxiety in the song. Flight 101 needs to land, but the dark runway makes that task perilous. They could misjudge where they are, touch down on the side of the runway, and God forbid crash into the airport terminal, ending in disaster. After a repeat of the chorus, Graham Oliver plays a second guitar solo, before Byford begins the third verse. third verse, he now sings from the perspective of all parties involved, starting with the controllers. By this point in the song, Flight 101's fuel level has reached reserve levels, which means they need to get on the ground before losing their engines. With the city in darkness, however, all they have is the moonlight to illuminate their way, and that's not enough to avoid trouble. Because of that, the plane overshoots the runway on their first attempt, so JFK orders them to go around. This is all standard procedure in aviation, but in their critical condition, Scandinavian Flight 101 makes another desperate plea for the ground crew to turn on the runway lights. So what's the climax of the song? How does this all turn out? Does Scandinavian 101 make it or not? Well, because the song ends with more repetitions of the chorus and a repeat of Quinn's guitar solo, it avoids discussing that. So now we have to clear up some missing details, and to do that we have to look outside the song. Starting with what we know so far, the Northeast blackout did indeed cripple JFK Airport, leaving no lights or radio communication for flights in or out of New York. Luckily, all the flights involved were able to divert and land safely, one of those flights being operated by Scandinavian Airlines, which had to divert to JFK from its intended destination. But it's from here that certain details of the song need to be looked closer at. For one, the plane involved likely wasn't a 747. As we established, the blackout took place in 1965, 4 years before the 747 even took to the skies. It was still on the drawing board in 1965. This means the Scandinavian Airlines flight was likely flown on a Douglas DC-8. Those planes were definitely flying in 1965. Biff Byford, however, says he remembered hearing another song that mentioned riding on a 747, and was inspired to use the mighty jumbo jet for Strangers in the Night. Next, Scandinavian Airlines likely didn't have a flight with the number 101. One flight I can find today between Stockholm, Sweden and JFK in New York is Flight 3998. It seems that flight number 101 was likely chosen for the song because it had a good ring to it when sung, much like how 747 has a better ring to it than DC-8. We got a 747 coming down in the night. Compare that to, we got a DC-8 coming down in the night. Moving on to another detail that needs explaining, we heard Byford mention that Flight 101 was inbound from Hawaii, and of Scandinavian Airlines' American destinations, Hawaii isn't one of them. So that suggests another bit of creative freedom on Byford's end, also perhaps to help the lyrics flow better. Or maybe the flight inbound from Hawaii isn't Scandinavian 101, it's another flight stuck in a holding pattern during the blackout. But these creative liberties still don't take away from the song's mission to explain what happened on that night in 1965. Listening to the song, the listener gets a clear sense of anxiety and worry, hoping the 747 will land without any incident, despite all the odds being stacked against it. Anyone who doesn't know the full story of the blackout might even believe that the flight didn't land at all, and on that note, the song might have inspired some people to look into the story of the blackout. It sure inspired me, or this behind the song wouldn't exist. So I hope you guys liked the video and at least found it entertaining. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on your notifications down below. And until next time, rock on. Bye for now. Now, if you saw the last episode, you might have recalled me here. I also shared a deeper dive of Saxon's history as a band in the previous episode. But the part that's relevant to this episode is... Come on, get it right. But the part that's relevant to this episode... Perhaps more branches struck this... Caused by a misset relay at the Sir Adam's back. Just one Adam, not all of them. Seems to switch from the perspective of the air traffic controller to an airline passenger. And on that note, the song might have inspired some people to look into the history. It's story.